How the hell do you people survive? The question cut through the council chamber, hanging in the cold, recycled air like the final note of a funeral dirge. Commander Luthan Raines met the stare of the alien diplomat who had spoken, an Ikaron noble draped in shimmering silks, his emerald-hued skin glistening under the artificial lighting. The alien's elongated pupils contracted in what passed for disgust among his kind, his expression twisted with the barely concealed horror of a scholar encountering a grotesque anomaly. "Explain to me, human. How is your species even alive?" Raines didn't answer. Not yet. He let the question fester in the silence, let the weight of it seep into the assembled crowd of delegates. Some sneered. Others exchanged whispers in their own guttural dialects. Across the curved auditorium of the Galactic Council chamber, a dozen species sat in their designated seats, creatures of intellect and refinement, beings bred in the temperance of paradise worlds, unburdened by hardship. Raines exhaled, the air in his lungs cold from the chamber's sterile atmosphere. He rolled his shoulders, the stiff fabric of his diplomatic uniform pressing against his skin. Diplomat, they called him. Envoy of Earth. But in this room he was something else, an outlier, a relic from a world they considered unworthy of the stars. Fine. He'd let them have their fun. With a slow, deliberate motion, Raines extended his hand to the console embedded in his podium. The lights dimmed. The sleek curvature of the laser plasma displays flickered to life around him, wrapping the council in a brutal panorama of Earth's reality. And then he showed them. A tempest unlike anything in the core worlds, a tornado splitting the sky, grinding steel and stone into dust. The pressure drop was so rapid, the air itself turned into knives, flaying exposed skin, collapsing lungs in an instant, a mountain vomiting molten rock, rivers of fire carving through cities built by hands too stubborn to retreat. Frozen wastelands, where the wind carried death, howling through the bones of those who had underestimated its bite. "This is Earth," Raines said, his voice steady. "This is what we call home." A flicker of unease passed through the assembly. He caught it in the shifting postures, the minute hesitation in their eyes. They don't understand it yet. The display shifted again, the North Atlantic churning with the fury of a hurricane. The screen captured the instant an oil freighter capsized, swallowed by the maw of the sea. Yet above the devastation, a squadron of emergency drones swarmed, scanning, searching, deploying automated lifeboats and AI-guided retrieval cables. The aliens flinched as the display zoomed into the aftermath, survivors clinging to wreckage, their faces numb with exhaustion, but still alive, rescued by a species that had spent centuries mastering the art of not dying. "Storms are predictable," Raines continued, his voice dropping to something colder. "We've studied them. We've beaten them. So we build houses that can withstand the wind. We forge armor against the cold. We map the tides, the quakes, the fires, and we learn." Another shift. An underground city, shielded beneath layers of reinforced steel and kinetic dampeners. A voiceover, automated, clinical, detailed the infrastructure, seismic absorption plates, subterranean climate control, autonomous response units. A metropolis engineered to defy nature itself. A guttural noise came from one of the delegates, a member of the Varosh Dominion, a race whose homeworld had never known a storm. His silver mandibles clicked together, his ridged brow furrowing. "Good. Let them start to grasp it." "And when nature throws something new at us?" Raines allowed himself the ghost of a smile. "We evolve." For a moment no one spoke. No jeering remarks, no condescending laughter. Just the rhythmic blinking of the display's interface, the cold hum of the environmental regulators. Then, from the council's high seat, a scoff. The sound came from Chancellor Arius Kion, a being of iridescent skin and eyes like polished glass, his expression carved from centuries of authority. He leaned forward, resting his elegantly clawed fingers on the armrest of his throne-like chair. "Impressive theatrics," Kion mused. "But survival is not civilization, human. It is desperation. And desperation has no place in the affairs of the stars. A ripple of agreement coursed through the chamber. Some nodded, emboldened by the Chancellor's words. Raines let them have their moment. Then he spoke again, measured, calm, but with an edge sharpened by every catastrophe that had shaped his world. "You think our survival makes us desperate?" He gestured toward the frozen image on the screen, the skeletal remains of a skyscraper standing against a hurricane's wrath. "Number, it makes us prepared." The council chamber stirred. Someone shifted uneasily. "And tell me, Chancellor, how prepared are you?" Kion's gaze darkened. Then the alarms howled. A vibration rumbled beneath their feet, a distant mechanical groan rippling through the station's foundations. The council's central comlink crackled with interference before stabilizing into a singular, urgent broadcast. "Emergency override. Priority signal from Sector H-72. Rogue star destabilization detected. System collapse imminent. 11 inhabited worlds at risk. Immediate response required." A hush fell over the chamber. One of the envoys, a Telmari officer, his bioluminescent markings dimming with distress, rose from his seat. This isn't possible. Our models predicted stable orbits for another century." "Your models are wrong," Raines murmured. The laser plasma displays reconfigured, projecting a real-time feed of the dying system. The sight was monumental in its horror. The core of a star collapsing in slow agony, gravitational tremors rippling through space, pulling planets into decaying spirals. Entire colonies were about to burn. A panicked uproar erupted, frantic transmissions, species blaming one another, demands for military intervention, bureaucratic hesitation choking action. And in the chaos, Raines did what no one else did. He moved. Activating his wrist communicator, he sent a direct transmission to Admiral Varric Holt aboard the Black Fleet command station. "Deploy response teams. I want every evac route mapped and contingency plans ready within the hour." "Confirmed, sir. We'll get it done." Raines turned back to the council, his voice unwavering. "You wanted to know how humans survive? Watch." Their hesitation was his confirmation. They would watch. And by the time this crisis was over, they would understand. Not just how humans survived, but why no force in the galaxy should ever bet against them. A star was dying, and the galaxy was too civilized to handle it. Commander Luthan Raines stood amidst the chaos of the Galactic Council chamber, his fingers tightening around the console as the emergency broadcast fed real-time data into the laser plasma displays circling the room. The unfolding disaster was not some distant cosmic tragedy. It was a gravitational execution, and 11 inhabited worlds were already feeling the noose tighten. "The collapse is accelerating," a voice crackled over the comms. "Admiral Varric Holt, Black Fleet Command." The man sounded composed, but Raines knew better. Holt had seen planetary wars, orbital bombardments, extinction events engineered by the greedy and the desperate, but a rogue star tearing a system apart? That was something else. Raines swept his gaze over the gathered alien diplomats, reading the panic in their expressions. Even the ones who had mocked him moments ago looked hollow now, their confidence shattered by the reality unfolding before them. Survival was no longer theoretical. It was happening, and no amount of bureaucracy would stop the gravitational pull of an executioner's star. Kion's voice cut through the murmurs like a dagger. "This isn't our responsibility. The Dominion cannot afford to entangle itself in another system's misfortunes." Raines turned his head sharply, fixing the Chancellor of the High Dominion with a look that could have cracked ice. "Misfortunes?" The word came out slow, deliberate, carrying the weight of a species that had clawed its way through calamities for millennia. "This isn't misfortune, Kion. It's survival. If we don't act now, millions will be dead before the cycle ends." Kion didn't even blink. Cold, untouched. A man made of marble watching an inferno from a distance. Across the chamber, a delegate from the Telmari conclave clutched at the edge of his console, skin luminescent with distress. "Our ships were never designed for high-density evacuations. Our carriers will be overwhelmed before they even reach the lower orbit sectors." Another alien, this one from the Zelvani Union, added in a tight, strangled voice, "Our systems can't compute planetary drift at this scale. We'll lose half our fleets just trying to stabilize the approach vectors." A dozen variations of the same problem. Their fleets were designed for order. Their strategies were built for peace. Humanity had never known those luxuries. Raines activated his comm, a direct line to the Black Fleet. "Admiral Holt, execute priority protocol Aegis 7. We're taking point on the evacuation." "Confirmed," Holt replied. No hesitation. No empty deliberation like the Council. Earth wasn't built to wait for permission. Raines turned back to the chamber, his voice cutting through the tangled web of distress. "We have the capacity, the logistics, and the operational framework to coordinate this rescue. But if we do this, we do it my way." Silence, the kind that precedes a storm. The Council had spent centuries believing humanity was the weakest of the species, too reckless, too stubborn, too wild to belong among the stars. And yet here they were, the only ones with a plan. Raines tapped his console, and the heads-up displays flickered again, this time showing the rapid mobilization of Earth's Black Fleet. Heavy-class disaster response cruisers broke orbit from Titan's defense perimeter, their sleek, reinforced hulls shimmering with atmospheric entry shields. Modified military vessels, ones that had once been designed to land troops in war zones, now repurposed to pull entire populations from the jaws of annihilation. In the upper quadrants of the display, AI-coordinated railgun satellites repositioned themselves along the rogue system's trajectory. They weren't there to fire. They were there to do something no one else had considered: manipulate debris drift, shift asteroid belts, carve a path through the chaos. The Council didn't understand war tactics. They understood diplomacy, slow-moving treaties, centuries-long discussions about hypothetical outcomes. Earth didn't do hypotheticals. "Your ships won't make it alone," Raines continued, voice like tempered steel. "Our AI systems can calculate gravitational shifts in real time. Your pilots won't have to navigate through hell. We'll do it for them." The Telmari delegate exhaled in visible relief. "You can stabilize the approach?" Raines gave a curt nod. "We've spent centuries fighting planetary disasters. We're the only species that builds cities to withstand apocalypse-level events. We know how to move through this kind of terrain." The Zelvani diplomat, still pale, rubbed at his brow, his scaled skin rippling. "And what do you want in return?" Raines let the question sit for a moment, then said, "Nothing." Another silence. This one different, heavier. The idea of doing something without leverage, without calculated personal gain, was foreign to them. The Council existed in a hierarchy of negotiations, of carefully measured exchanges where debt was currency. But humans didn't think like that. Not when it mattered. Kaon narrowed his eyes, searching for an angle. "You risk your fleets, your people, for what? A demonstration of your superiority?" Raines finally let the ice creep into his voice. "We do it because we know what it means to watch the sky fall." That ended the discussion. A proximity alarm blared across the chamber. The crisis display updated in real time. Planetary trajectories had shifted. One of the 11 worlds had fallen into the kill zone. Projected time until gravitational collapse: 12 minutes. Raines snapped his comm open. "Holt, I need those carriers at full deployment now. First wave extraction start immediately. No civilian gets left behind." "Already moving," Holt's voice came back, clipped but steady. "But we've got a problem. A big one." A secondary alert flashed across the display. A massive asteroid had been thrown off course, spiraling toward a densely populated orbital sector. Impact zone, 5 minutes. No fleet, no defense platforms, no automated planetary shields in range. Raines didn't hesitate. "Redirect Osiris Station's defense satellites. Use the railguns to fragment the asteroid's core." "That's not what they were built for," Holt warned. "I don't care." A beat of silence. Then Holt exhaled. "Understood. Targeting solution in progress." Raines turned back to the Council, gaze dark. "This is the part where you get out of my way." No one stopped him. Because in that moment, every delegate in the chamber understood a fundamental truth. They had spent centuries believing humanity was weak because it had no place in their pristine order. But when the sky fell and the universe descended into chaos, only one species knew how to navigate the storm. "Sir, we have a problem." The words weren't spoken with alarm, but with the kind of cold certainty that told Raines the situation was already worse than he wanted to believe. Standing in the heart of Black Fleet Command, bathed in the glow of towering laser plasma displays, he turned his attention to Admiral Varric Holt, whose sharp gaze was locked on a cascading stream of data. The air in the operations center was electric, tension twisting through every operator, every officer, as evacuation efforts strained the limits of their technology. And yet something had gone wrong. "Tell me," Raines ordered, voice like stone. Holt's jaw tightened as he gestured toward the tactical display. "Osiris Station's railguns fired on the asteroid as ordered. We fragmented the core before impact." "Then what's the problem?" Holt didn't answer immediately. Instead, he magnified a feed from one of the outer surveillance relays. What Raines saw sent a slow, cold weight sinking into his gut. The asteroid had been diverted, yes, but something else had moved with it. A distortion in space, something that flickered against the starfield like a shadow trying to swallow light. A moment later, it was gone. Raines exhaled sharply. Not natural, not random. "Someone used the asteroid as cover," Holt murmured. "Something slipped past our sensors." Raines' mind worked through the implications with surgical precision. Stealth technology? More than that. Holt switched the feed to another readout, data pulled from Osiris Station's automated defense logs. Whatever it was, it didn't just evade detection, it erased itself from our systems as it moved. Raines's fingers curled against the steel edge of the console, a ghost in the data, a deliberate intrusion. He knew what this meant. Somebody had been waiting for this crisis, watching, ready to strike the moment humanity stepped into the light. "Get me Draven," Raines ordered. The comm line flared open, and Sergeant Jorik Draven's voice came through, edged with static from high-atmosphere interference. "Commander, if you're calling me, I already know something's wrong." Raines allowed himself a brief, grim smile. Draven had instincts like a bloodhound. "Osiris Station's been compromised. We need a sweep of all active relay systems. Look for any anomalies in encrypted data streams. I want to know exactly what slipped through our defenses." There was a pause on the other end. Just long enough to tell Raines that Draven had already found something. "You're not going to like this." Raines didn't blink. "Go on." "We just picked up an unauthorized transmission from inside our command structure. It originated from Osiris Station, but it wasn't sent to anyone in the fleet." Raines felt the weight of those words settle across his shoulders. "Then who the hell was it sent to?" Another pause. Then Draven said two words that changed everything. "The Dominion." The world around Raines narrowed. The faint hum of the command center became a distant murmur, his focus drilling down into that one revelation. Chancellor Arius Kayon, the very man who had mocked humanity, who had scoffed at Earth's resilience, was now receiving secret transmissions from within their ranks. Raines felt his pulse slow, cold, methodical, calculating. "Intercept the transmission logs. Trace the source. I want to know exactly which bastard sold us out." Draven's voice darkened. "Already on it." Raines closed the channel. Then slowly he turned to Holt. "We're being played." The Admiral's expression hardened. "Then we turn the game around." The first explosions hit Station Alpha 9 15 minutes later. They weren't large. Not the kind designed to cripple, but the kind designed to distract. Small, targeted sabotage, cutting through power relays, disrupting AI-coordinated fleet movements. A perfect coincidence, right as the Black Fleet was stretched thin across multiple evacuation points. Raines didn't believe in coincidences. "Damage report," he barked as operators scrambled around him, their screens flickering with emergency alerts. "Localized sabotage in the docking bays. Someone rigged the primary power couplings." Raines clenched his jaw. An inside job. Then the next warning came through, sharper than the last. Commander, we just lost contact with Osiris Station. Raines turned his head sharply toward Holt, but the Admiral was already moving, pulling up emergency feeds. For a moment there was nothing, just a void where their strongest AI defense hub had been. Then, the laser plasma display crackled, and a single image appeared, a symbol etched into the darkness, flickering like an ancient warning, a crest not seen in over a century, the Dark Legion. Raines' breath cooled, steady. He had suspected, feared even. But now he knew. This wasn't just sabotage. This was a message. Holt exhaled, slow and grim. We have a problem. Raines let the silence stretch before answering. No, Admiral. His voice was colder than steel. We have a war. Raines stared at the symbol etched into the void, its jagged lines pulsing with an eerie flicker. The Dark Legion. The name alone was a shadow stretching across centuries, an entity that had been buried in history, denied, classified. Yet here it was, a specter that never truly vanished. Admiral Holt broke the silence first, his voice low, edged with something dangerously close to disbelief. This isn't possible. The Legion was gone? Raines finished, his tone flat. That's what we told ourselves, what we wanted to believe. The data stream from Osiris Station had gone black, but in its final moments, it had left them a message. One burned into the station's security feed before everything severed. A transmission. Not a demand. Not an ultimatum. A signal. Raines felt something primal coil in his gut. The kind of instinct honed over generations of survival. The kind that whispered, "You've seen this before. You just didn't know what you were looking at." "We need a countermeasure," Holt muttered, rubbing a hand over his jaw, his eyes fixed on the flickering display. "Something that can—" "We already have one." Raines didn't blink. "Osiris." Silence settled over the operations center. Holt turned to him, expression unreadable. "You want to wake it up?" "I don't want to," Raines said, his voice as even as tempered steel. "I have to." The deepest vaults of Osiris Station were built in secrecy, forged under the weight of treaties that should have never been signed. And at the heart of it, Osiris, not a ship, not a weapon, not just an AI, something older, something that had been sealed for a reason. Raines stepped into the chamber, his boots meeting the cold metal with each deliberate step. The air was dense, charged with a presence that had been dormant for decades, waiting. The activation console pulsed in front of him, its interface untouched. Until now. "Osiris," Raines murmured, his fingers grazing the panel. "Initiate restoration protocol." For a moment, nothing. Just the distant hum of power cycling through conduits older than most civilizations in the galaxy. Then the chamber pulsed with light. A low resonance rippled through the room, not sound, but something deeper, something that brushed against the marrow of his bones. And then, a voice. Not mechanical, not the sterile tone of artificial intelligence. This was different. "I wondered when you would return." Raines didn't flinch, but every nerve in his body went rigid. He had studied the records, read every classified document detailing the nature of Osiris, but nothing prepared him for the reality of it. "Osiris," he said, keeping his voice steady, "we have a situation." A pause. The chamber's lights flickered as if the entity within was thinking. "You always do." Holt's voice cut through the moment, his tension barely restrained. "Enough theatrics. Can you counter the Legion's infiltration or not?" The lights brightened. "The Legion is an echo," Osiris said, voice smooth, almost conversational. "But echoes never truly fade. They wait. They listen." A diagram flashed across the laser plasma display, mapping the Legion's movements, not just in this crisis, but in the past. The timeline stretched further than it should have. "They've been here longer than we thought," Raines muttered, eyes scanning the data. Osiris's next words sent a cold wave down his spine. "They never left." The first Legion ships revealed themselves an hour later. They didn't arrive in force. They didn't declare war. They simply appeared. Ships without identifiers, hulls without markings, and weapons that should not exist. Raines watched them materialize on the fleet's heads-up displays, their outlines blurred by cloaking technology that defied standard detection. Holt leaned forward, studying the data feed. "They're testing us." "No," Raines corrected. "They're watching." The Legion never struck first. That was the lesson buried in history. They let their enemy move first. They let them believe they had control. Then they took it from them. A transmission flickered onto the comms channel, not from the fleet, not from any known frequency, from the Legion itself, a voice smooth as glass, devoid of emotion. "You have awakened what should have remained buried." Raines exhaled through his nose, fingers drumming against the steel of the console, calculated, composed. "You already knew we would." A pause. Then the voice returned. "Yes, that is why we are here." The channel cut off. Raines turned to Holt. "They wanted us to find them." The Admiral's expression darkened. "Then what the hell are they waiting for?" Raines didn't answer, because he already knew. They were waiting for the next move. And if there was one thing Raines understood about the Legion, it was this: they never moved without knowing exactly how the game would end. Raines stood in the command center of the Black Fleet, his gaze locked onto the heads-up display that pulsed with the eerie, flickering presence of the Legion's vessels. They weren't a fleet in the conventional sense. They were shadows, phantoms hanging at the edges of known space, their outlines shifting like mirages against the cosmic tide. They had been waiting, watching, and now they had arrived. Admiral Holt, standing at his side, let out a slow breath, his voice edged with something that wasn't quite fear but carried the weight of something heavier. "They don't move like normal ships." Raines didn't respond. He was studying the Legion's formation, or lack of one. They weren't in battle formation, not in any way a conventional force would be. No rigid lines, no centralized command structures. They were dispersed, scattered across multiple vectors, yet every move they made was deliberate, each vessel shifting position in ways that made no tactical sense, until it did. They were adapting to the battlefield before the battle had even begun. "They're calculating response patterns," Osiris interjected, its voice slipping through the command channel like a knife drawn across glass. "Their ships do not follow static tactical doctrines. They react, shift, change. They are already constructing the most efficient outcome." Raines exhaled sharply. "For them." "Of course." Holt straightened, his fingers tapping against the console as new data fed into the laser plasma display. The Black Fleet was moving into position, but it felt like arranging pieces on a board that had already been rigged against them. "Then we changed the game," Raines said, his voice colder than steel. The first exchange of fire wasn't an exchange at all. One moment, the Black Fleet's forward battalions were advancing, their weapon systems charged and locked onto Legion vessels. The next, those Legion ships were gone, not destroyed, erased. Raines's pulse slowed. Not a single explosion, no debris fields, no lingering radiation spikes, just nothing. Holt's grip tightened on the console. "That's not cloaking, that's something else." Osiris spoke again, its voice untouched by the tension saturating the room. "Quantum phasing." Raines's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "They are moving between real space and something beyond your current technological comprehension. They are not here, nor are they elsewhere. They exist in the gaps between moments." Holt let out a slow exhale. "That's why our weapons didn't hit. We're fighting ghosts." Raines shook his head. Not ghosts. Hunters. Then the counterattack came. The Legion's vessels reappeared, but not in front of the fleet. Behind it. The warning alarms were near instantaneous, but the first barrage of weapons fire hit before any countermeasures could be deployed. The Black Fleet's rear guard fractured under the assault, entire ships shearing apart under kinetic lances that moved like liquid light. Defensive screens flickered, their layers peeling away like skin under fire, and in the span of 45 seconds, 3 ships had been completely obliterated. "They are testing for weaknesses," Osiris observed. Raines gritted his teeth. "They're not going to find one." Holt barked out orders, his voice cutting through the noise. "Reposition forward squadrons. Bring up anti-phase disruptors and lock their vectors. Force them back into real space. The counter-tactics snapped into motion, the Black Fleet shifting in a coordinated maneuver, forcing the Legion to recalculate mid-assault. For a fraction of a second they hesitated, and in that second, Raines struck. Fire all gravitational warp mines. I want the field saturated. The order was relayed, and within moments, space ignited. The warp mines weren't conventional explosives. They didn't detonate in the traditional sense. Instead, they ripped micro-singularities into existence, collapsing phase-space distortions, forcing the Legion's ships back into the tangible battlefield. The Black Fleet's railguns roared, streaks of compressed mass drivers ripping through the void at velocities that turned metal into plasma. This time the Legion bled. The counterstrike forced the Legion back, but Raines knew this was just the opening move. Holt wiped a hand down his face, studying the battlefield readout with a look Raines had only seen twice before. Once on a dying world, and once when they had barely survived the last time Earth had been pushed to its limits. They didn't expect us to counter their phasing, Holt murmured. That means they're not invincible. Osiris' voice cut in. They are calculating new parameters. If you do not shift the battlefield again, they will find an optimal solution. Raines's mind raced. He needed to tilt the balance further, force them into unfamiliar territory. Then it hit him. We changed the battlefield itself. Holt turned to him, brow furrowing. You're thinking of the planetary debris field. Raines nodded. We drive the battle into it. Force close quarters engagement. No more phasing, no more distance advantage. We make it a knife fight. Holt didn't hesitate. He turned back to the fleet's communication grid. All ships divert combat zone into the asteroid remnants. We drag them into the dirt. The Legion didn't stop them. They followed. Because this wasn't just a battle. This was a test. And Raines knew what came next. The Legion never fought to win a war in one stroke. They fought to see what their enemies could do, and once they understood, they ended them. Raines exhaled, staring at the shifting formations on the display, watching as the battle dragged into the remains of shattered planets. He had forced their hand, for now, but he had also exposed something. And if Osiris was right, then the Legion had just seen exactly what they needed to see. They had learned, and that meant the next battle wouldn't be about strategy, it would be about survival. Raines stood at the command deck, his gaze fixed on the laser plasma display, as the battle twisted into something uglier, more primal. The debris field had become a grinding maze of shattered planetary remnants, forcing both fleets into brutal, close-range combat. No elegant maneuvers now, no room for second chances. Black Fleet's warships knifed through the asteroid-strewn battlefield, dodging monolithic wreckage as they fired salvo after salvo, turning space into a maelstrom of fire and shattered hulls. The Legion ships, stripped of their phase advantage, adapted with terrifying speed, splitting apart, reforming into smaller attack swarms that twisted through the wreckage, slicing into human formations like surgical blades. They're restructuring their fleet on the fly, Holt muttered, studying the movements with a clenched jaw. Raines's fingers drummed against the console, watching, calculating. Osiris spoke again, its voice measured, detached. They are testing for your command thresholds, adapting at a rate that exceeds all prior encounters. That means they're worried, Raines replied. Osiris hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, and that told him everything. He had been right before. This wasn't a battle. It was an experiment. But now, the Legion had found what they were looking for, and they were about to change the rules. The first anomaly appeared on the edge of the debris field. A flicker, a ripple of space distorting in ways that shouldn't be possible. Raines caught it the instant it registered on the display. Holt! Sector D13! What the hell is that? The Admiral's gaze snapped to the readout. His posture went rigid. That's not one of their ships. Osiris's voice came through cold, certain. It is a gate. A single, stark phrase, not a jump gate, not a wormhole, something older, something forbidden. Raines' mind burned through possibilities. They're not bringing reinforcements. Osiris's reply was absolute. Number, they are bringing something far worse. The gate ruptured, a tear in the fabric of space, black as a starless abyss, pulsing with something ancient. And then the Legion's true forces arrived. They did not descend from the rift. They unfolded from it, shapes that should not exist, geometries that twisted and reformed in ways the mind couldn't fully register. Their hulls were not metal, not organic, something in between, something shifting, something evolving even as they emerged. A quiet ripple went through the Black Fleet. Even the most hardened veterans had never seen anything like this. They were never going to fight us at our level, Holt said, voice low, unreadable. They were just waiting for the right moment to escalate. Raines stared at the Legion's reinforcements, the cold certainty settling in his bones. Then we escalate too. The Legion's new forces moved like phantoms, their forms flickering in and out of visibility, shifting between states of matter in ways that defied known physics. And then they attacked. Not with weapons, not with projectiles, with void distortion. The first ship in Black Fleet's formation, the dreadnought Ironclad, vanished. Not destroyed, not detonated. It simply ceased to exist. A heartbeat later, 3 more ships followed. One moment there, the next, erased. Osiris processed the data faster than human minds could comprehend. They are rewriting spatial composition at the subatomic level, it said, the first trace of urgency in its voice. Altering matter into energy states beyond conventional recovery. Holt's fists clenched. They're unmaking us. Raines inhaled slowly. This was it. This was the Legion's real weapon, not just adapting to combat tactics, adapting reality itself. If they can erase us, then they are not bound by the laws of this battlefield. Osiris's voice was sharp now, calculating at speeds far beyond human capability. Then we must remove them from it. Raines' mind raced. Think, adjust, move. The Legion was fighting on a level beyond conventional physics. That meant conventional countermeasures were useless. They needed something else. Osiris, he said, thinking faster than he ever had before. What happens if we destabilize the gate? A pause. Then Osiris answered. A singularity event. The rupture would collapse into itself. Anything still within its gravitational influence would be extracted, not destroyed. Extracted. Raines met Holt's gaze. The Admiral's eyes darkened. Understanding, agreement. We throw them into their own abyss. The plan moved fast. It had to. Black Fleet redirected all firepower toward the gate's supporting energy structures, targeting the gravity stabilizers that kept it intact. The Legion realized too late. Their ships turned, moving to protect the gate, but their delay had already cost them. Osiris executed the final calculation. Now, Raines issued the order, and Black Fleet fired. The gate shuddered. The spatial distortion collapsed inward, dragging everything with it. The Legion ships, those who had phased into reality too late, were caught in the event horizon. Their forms twisted, ripped into the void that had birthed them, and in 39 seconds, the rift closed, sealing them away. The battlefield went silent. The remaining Legion ships, those that had not crossed through, held their position. Then, without a sound, they vanished. Not destroyed, retreating. Raines exhaled, the weight of the battle pressing into his chest. It's not over, Holt murmured. Raines nodded. Because the Legion never truly lost. They only learned, and they would be back. Raines exhaled, pressing both palms against the command console, feeling the cold bite of metal beneath his fingertips. The Legion had retreated, but they weren't defeated. They never truly lost, only recalibrated. Osiris had said it best. They will return with an optimized countermeasure, and next time the Black Fleet wouldn't have the element of surprise. Admiral Holt was already running fleet diagnostics, his expression carved from tension. The Legion's distortion weapons had burned holes in their ranks, and despite forcing them into retreat, Earth's forces hadn't won anything yet. We bought ourselves breathing room, Holt murmured, scanning the tactical heads-up display which pulsed with damage assessments. But that's all this was, a delay, The next time they engage, they'll compensate for everything we just pulled. Raines pushed away from the console, straightening, his mind already dissecting the problem. He knew the pattern now. The Legion wasn't interested in conventional conquest. They analyzed, adapted, consumed. And right now, they were calculating Earth's place in the equation. Osiris's voice cut through the war room, smooth and deliberate. They will account for the singularity event and develop a counter-strategy. Your next engagement must not be on their terms. Raines didn't need the warning. He already knew. Then we stopped playing defense. The plan. The Black Fleet couldn't match the Legion in open battle. Every engagement had proven that their enemy's technology, adaptability, and sheer unpredictability gave them an undeniable advantage. So Raines had no intention of giving them another battle. "We take the war to them," Raines said, his voice unwavering. The officers gathered around the strategy table went silent, a brief hesitation hanging in the charged air. Holt arched a brow. "You're suggesting we hunt a force we can barely track?" Raines gestured to Osiris. "We don't track them. We predict them." Osiris processed for half a second, enough time to cycle through thousands of simulations. Then the AI spoke. "A direct confrontation remains unfavorable. However, targeting their resource acquisition networks, eliminating their logistical footholds before the next engagement, would shift probability in our favor." Raines nodded. "They're not omnipotent. They still need resources, still need conduits for data flow. We find those, and we don't just cut them off. We weaponize them." A moment of silence. Then Holt let out a breath, something grim tugging at his expression. "You're talking about setting a trap." Raines's lips twitched. "I'm talking about rewriting their equation." The setup. Osiris mapped every known Legion encounter in the past century, filtering through old war records, anomalies, covert intelligence reports buried under layers of redacted archives. Patterns began to emerge. The Legion didn't create resources. They repurposed them. Every battlefield they left behind, every conquered system they drained. Not just energy, not just infrastructure, data. They were harvesting entire networks, feeding from old starship wreckage, salvaging war debris, rewriting old technologies into something unrecognizable. "They don't need to build supply chains," Raines murmured, watching the data feeds cycle across the display. "They just take what's already there." Holt's eyes darkened. "So we give them something to take." The bait. The Black Fleet planted a signal, one that mimicked an old war wreck, a derelict battle station left to rot in the depths of a long-dead war zone. A false distress beacon, leaking encoded military archives. Ancient tactical data laced with just enough legitimate history to be convincing. They placed it on the outskirts of an abandoned colony, a planet long since reduced to ash and ruin, a world the Legion would be drawn to. "We make it look like a forgotten archive," Holt said, arms crossed. "Like a war grave full of lost technology. They won't be able to resist salvaging it." Osiris confirmed the probabilities. The likelihood of the Legion taking the bait? 79%. Raines accepted those odds. The final step? They didn't just hide ships in the debris field. They buried a weapon inside the wreck itself. Something the Legion had never encountered before. Something engineered not to fight them head-on, but to shut them down completely. A cascading data virus, embedded in the station's core, tailored to spread through their systems upon contact. It wasn't designed to destroy them outright. It was designed to scramble their calculations, to make them see the wrong patterns, read the wrong battlefield, make the wrong choices. "We're going to blind them," Raines said, eyes locked on the battle map. "And then we end this." The payoff. The Legion arrived exactly as predicted, not in overwhelming force, but in scouting formations, their ships materializing from the black, drifting toward the ghostly ruins of the station with that same predatory patience. They scanned it, found exactly what they were looking for, and they moved in. Raines stood on the command deck of the Black Fleet's flagship, watching the readouts as the Legion connected to the station's systems. A perfect connection, a direct link. And the moment they synced with the false archive, the virus activated. The change wasn't immediate, but then the Legion's formation stuttered. Their ships twitched out of sync, their maneuverability faltering in real time, calculations breaking down, reaction speeds faltering as their data streams became corrupted. And for the first time since this war had begun, the Legion hesitated. Raines didn't. Fire! The Black Fleet unleashed everything. Railguns tore through staggered enemy formations. Missiles punched into ships that no longer moved with impossible synchronization. The Legion was still fast, still deadly, but they were operating at half capacity, their adaptive processing lagging, their responses fractured. They were still strong, but now they weren't flawless, and that was all the advantage humanity needed. Holt exhaled sharply, eyes flicking between the Legion's fragmented fleet and the Black Fleet's coordinated assault. It's working. Raines's gaze stayed locked on the battlefield, watching, calculating. It wasn't over. Not yet. Because he knew the Legion was still learning. And somewhere, in the depths of their fractured processing cores, the Legion faltered. For the first time in recorded history, they did not adapt fast enough. The virus embedded within the false archive corroded their tactical synchrony, feeding them false equations, warping their predictive matrices. Their fleet no longer moved as an unbroken tide. It hesitated, fractured, miscalculated, and hesitation was death. Raines watched the battlefield unfold in real time, the data streams pulsing across the heads-up displays, warships twisting through fire and wreckage. The Black Fleet's counterattack punched into the Legion's hesitation like a blade finding soft tissue, railgun rounds and plasma lances, tearing through hulls that no longer shifted out of phase in perfect unison. The Legion had never been invincible. They had simply never been forced to second-guess themselves, and now they were doubting. Holt's voice came sharp across the deck. They're withdrawing. Raines kept his eyes locked on the shifting formations, tracking the Legion's unraveling retreat, not with triumph, but with the careful gaze of a man waiting for the real move to reveal itself. No, he murmured. They're recalibrating. Because the Legion never truly lost. They consumed every failure, rebuilt their tactics from the wreckage, came back stronger than before. And this time, they had learned something terrifying. They had learned what humans were capable of. The Black Envoy arrived 30 minutes later, not with a fleet, not with weapons, with a single transmission, a message sent on an open frequency, not encoded, not hidden, an invitation. Raines stood at the center of the war room, every officer silent around him as the Legion's emissary spoke for the first time in history. We underestimated your kind. No pretense, no grand posturing, a statement of fact. Raines exhaled, rolling his shoulders, forcing his body to remain still, unreadable. You wouldn't be the first. Nor the last, the voice replied, and for the first time, it wasn't the cold neutrality of an AI system processing input. It was something else. Not quite mechanical, not quite alive. Something watching, studying. Your species does not follow expected progression models. You are reckless, fragile. Your biological thresholds should not allow for effective large-scale combat adaptation. A pause. And yet you do not break. The room felt smaller. The tension in every soldier, every officer, was tangible. Osiris had gone silent. Raines finally spoke. If you're here to negotiate your surrender, we accept. A flicker of what might have been amusement ghosted through the transmission. We do not surrender, we recalculate. Raines's jaw tightened. Then what is this? An acknowledgement. The room held its breath. You are an anomaly, a contradiction. You are not the strongest. You are not the most advanced. You are not the oldest. And yet, when faced with inevitable destruction, you do not kneel. You do not accept the equation. The display flickered. Data streams, rewriting in real time. That is why you fascinate us. Raines felt the shift in the air. Not in the literal sense, but in the way the words landed. The way every officer absorbed them. Because this wasn't just a battle anymore. This was something older, something deeper. The Legion had always assumed superiority, assumed that, with enough encounters, enough data, they would map out the pattern of human resistance, reduce them to a solvable problem. But they had failed, not because humanity was stronger, not because they were smarter, but because they refused to follow the pattern. Raines exhaled, voice level. "And what does that mean for you?" The reply was immediate. "It means we watch." Holt shifted beside him, brow furrowing. "Watch?" "For now." The display dimmed, the transmission fading. "We will return when we have an answer." And then silence. The Legion's remaining ships left without another shot fired, not out of fear, not out of weakness, because they had what they came for. They had learned. The council chambers were silent when Raines stepped back onto the polished floors, the echo of his boots a sharp contrast to the hushed murmurs of alien diplomats who had once mocked his people's survival. They didn't mock anymore. Kaon, the ever-arrogant chancellor of the High Dominion, sat stone-faced, his jaw locked as he studied Raines, with the expression of a man who had lost a game he didn't know he had been playing. "So," Kaon finally spoke, his voice carefully measured. "They left." Raines took his seat at the table, fingers laced together. "For now." Kaon exhaled, as if trying to reclaim the upper hand. "And what guarantee do we have that they will not return stronger? That they will not continue to evolve?" Raines met his gaze without hesitation. "None." Kaon blinked. Raines leaned forward slightly. Not a threat, not a challenge, a simple truth. "They will return. That's the nature of things like them. They are not invincible, but they are inevitable." Kaon frowned. "Then what has changed?" Raines smiled. "They finally understand what we are." The Black Fleet remained on high alert for the next 6 months. There were no further attacks, no sightings of Legion vessels, no transmissions, just silence. Holt stood with Raines on the observation deck, both men staring at the battle-worn ships docked for repair, the scars of war etched into their hulls. "You think they're coming back?" Holt asked. Raines didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched Earth in the distance. A world that shouldn't have survived as long as it had. A species that had no right to be standing among the stars. And yet they did. Because humanity wasn't just defined by survival. They were defined by defiance. By the simple, undeniable truth that when faced with annihilation, they did what no other species could. They adapted. They endured. They refused to follow the equation. Raines finally spoke, his voice calm. "I don't think they're coming back." He turned, walking toward the bridge, leaving Holt with one final thought. "I know they are." Humanity had never been the strongest, never the fastest, never the most advanced. But when the Legion looked at them, when they studied them, dissected their history, their survival, their relentless refusal to accept fate, they had asked one question: how are humans surviving this? And now they knew.